Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for Vintage Books Live. Tonight we have Laurel Gale. Laurel is a now in Idaho, formerly in Washington. She jumped to the other side of the border, but she's a regional Pacific Northwest writer, and her debut picture book is coming out on October 15th. It's called Robots Don't Make You Go to Bed. But those of you who have had middle graders in the past few years might know her from her middle grade novels. She's got three lovely middle grade novels. Dead Boy is my favorite, and it's perfect for Halloween time. So you can probably find a used copy or a copy online. We may have one in the store even, so you can always call and see if we've got one. We're really pleased to have her here tonight. And I'm especially pleased because I got to read a very, very early draft of this story. So when I saw it pop up in the catalog, I was very excited to see that it had made it through to the other side, because any of you who have done any writing know that doesn't happen with all the books that you work on. So I wondered, Laurel, if you could just start off with if you remember, because it's been a long time, where did the original idea from this book come from? And then can you talk a little bit about just the process of idea to book, um, and how that works? And I don't think that we've talked about this in a little while on Vintage Books Live, just the process of the picture book process, like what kind of, you write it, what kind of steps does it go through to end up on the shelves in the store?
Okay, so yeah, as far as the idea for this book, and I have a copy right here.
Yay, thank you.
It was a while ago. I wrote the first draft in 2016. So my memory might not be perfect of the whole
That's
process back
okay.
then. But I believe this one actually came from a brainstorming session. Sometimes I just sit myself down. I say, I'm going to generate some ideas. I'm going to come up with a list of ideas, and then I'm going to, pick my favorite ideas and work with those and combine ideas and just keep working with them until I have something I like. And I wanted to write a book about robots because I think robots are fun. Of course, this was before the whole AI explosion. Although if you feel like robots have been overhyped, Owen comes to the same conclusion, so you might like that. So yeah, I wanted to write about robots because I thought that they were fun, and I just tried to look at it from a kid's perspective. Why would a young kid want a robot? What do they think it would be like? What would appeal to them? And then how could things go wrong? How could things, go in a different direction,
Yeah.
and lead to an interesting story? Not all of my picture book ideas start that way, but
Yeah.
I definitely like, sitting down and brainstorming. I think the more you push that creativity, the easier it is to come up with ideas. Once you just start almost forcing the ideas, they start to flow a little more easily after a while. Sometimes I have ideas just when I'm doing random things. So I like to have a notebook next to my
Yeah.
bed, or if I'm out, taking a walk, I might send a quick email to myself or write it in my calendar so I don't forget.
Yeah.
Just, some way to get on my cell phone. Just, little things can inspire an idea. And then the writing process for picture books, it is a lot different than the writing process for middle grade novels. When I write middle grade novels, I, I come up with the idea, sometimes from a brainstorming session too. And then sometimes I'll write maybe a page or so that I can really get just an idea of the tone, the voice, the characters, and the setting. But I won't want to write a lot until I sit down and make sure I have the plot. I want to
Yeah.
I want to make sure, even if I don't have all the subplots and know exactly what the chapter breaks are going to be, I want to make sure I have an idea of the story structure, what the climax is going to be, and what the ending is going to be, so that I don't write myself into a corner or spend months writing a book that just goes nowhere.
Yeah, yeah.
But with picture books, that's not as much an issue because they are shorter. They're not necessarily easier, but they're definitely shorter. So when I come up with an idea, I'll usually just write the first draft. I won't necessarily do um, any work on trying to plot it out ahead of time because once I have the draft, I can go back
Yeah.
and do all the revisions, all the edits
Oh,
to make
yeah.
sure that
Yeah.
the story works. So that's a really different process. And I do find more and more I try to also think about the page breaks. In a novel, you're going to be focusing on the chapter breaks because you want the reader to have to start that next chapter. Like, oh no, I can't
Yeah.
go to bed
Yeah.
now. I have to read this next chapter. With a picture book, you want them to be excited to turn the page. Um, so even though, when I'm writing it, I don't necessarily know how the layout's going to work because a lot of that is going to be out of my hands. I still try to think, where would I put the page breaks? What would I make the spreads? So that I at least know that it works, that it can work. And then I think about like how would I get readers to try to go to the next page and to want to go to the next page. Um, and then I guess I can talk about, the entire process after I write it. That's
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I was going to ask you, I mean, I think we can, um, I'll jump in and ask a couple things so you don't have to like just do the spiel because I realized that was going to take a while. Um, I had actually put this question in there and I think it fits better here. Um, you talked a little bit about the difference between middle grade and picture books and how you're thinking about different things. And I was curious, how hard was the jump from one to the other? Did it take a bit to kind of get your head in a space of like it's breaking at a page instead of a, excuse me, a chapter? Or did that come more naturally just because you kind of knew the story and
Well, hmm, I'd say the biggest challenge for me in the transition was the voice. Um, and my first picture book manuscripts were not good. Even though I had at that point published, um, I think one or maybe even my second middle grade novel at that point, I really was kind of starting over with picture books. It
yeah,
maybe didn't take as long because I knew a little bit more, but I really did have to build a voice and get a sense for what works. In terms of story, a lot of it's very similar. You need clear characters. You want good characters. You
yeah,
want a
yeah,
good setting. You need a good premise, but also a good story. A good premise on its own isn't enough. It has to have a
yeah,
compelling plot with a beginning, middle, and end. It's just a matter of then condensing that into about 500 words instead of
yeah,
30,000 to
yeah,
60,000,
yeah.
which can sometimes be more difficult.
I think the I think the shorter it is, the harder it is, just because you want has to pop. So, it really has to catch your attention and
Yeah,
in a
every
different
word
way.
matters.
Yeah,
Every word
yeah,
matters, definitely. So yeah, the voice for me was harder. And once I got that, once I had a better idea, a better sense of what worked, then writing picture books became easier. Not
yeah,
all of my picture books pan out. Sometimes I write a
yeah, yeah.
manuscript and then I decide, no, that's not great. Or maybe I'm excited for a couple of days and then I realize
Yeah,
no.
yeah.
um,
So you have a picture book You've made the transition, you've got your words together, you've got your story. Um, I think I know the answer to this because I think we talked about it at the time, but for the benefit of the audience, like you had worked in the middle grade world, you'd sold, I think you'd had two come out, I think by then, and you had another one that came out later. So you were in that space and you were established. The business side of it, for those of you in the audience who aren't aware, typically with fiction in particular, you need an agent, and not all agents represent all genres. And I can't remember, I think you ended up having to have a different agent for picture books. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Ooh,
Without going into any details, obviously, that you can't go into, but just the general sort of overall process.
okay. Yeah, so I have had multiple agents. It can be difficult to find the right fit,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
the right fit doesn't necessarily mean the best agent. I think that some of the agents I've had have been good agents. I would recommend them to other people. But finding the right fit can be hard. And part of that certainly is finding someone who wants to represent maybe not every single manuscript that I write, because sometimes they're right to say, no, this isn't this isn't
Yeah.
one we want to
Yeah.
submit. But at least everything that I'm really passionate about writing, the different genres and the different types. So that was a challenge, and transitioning to picture books made that more of a challenge. I
Yeah. Yeah.
actually sold um, Robots Don't Make You Go to Bed. I submitted this um, myself, not with an agent. I am agented now, but when I submitted this one, I did it directly to the publisher, Familius.
So yeah, no, I think that's another like behind the scenes thing that people don't really realize sometimes is that, there is a multiple step process for most people
Mhm,
that, you have a manuscript, then you're getting the manuscript edited, and then you're looking for an agent, and or you're doing a ton of homework if you're not, looking for an agent, trying to figure out
mhm,
where you're going to submit.
mhm.
And so I'm going to jump forward. You have an agent, and let's just jump forward to when the book has sold. Can you talk a little bit about what the experience as a writer is, particularly a writer who's not also the illustrator, what the experience is like once you've sold your work, what does that process look like for picture books? I know it's different for a middle grade novel or other novels, but
Yeah, it's really different. There's always waiting involved. With novels, you have to wait for edits. The editor isn't always ready to work on that immediately because they have other projects, they have other things going on.
how dare they?
I know, right? No, publishing has a lot of waiting, but with picture books, there's more waiting. And it's necessary because the illustrations take a lot of time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I have so much respect and admiration for picture book illustrators.
Yeah.
So the process, let's see, in my experience, you sell the book and you celebrate, and then you wait. And then you wait some more. And then it goes through edits, and the editing process can be stressful, but it can also be wonderful because my goal is always to end up with a book that I'm going to be very proud of, that I'm going to want to share with everyone. And so I'm happy to go through edits
Yeah.
that are going to make the book stronger. So some back and forth with edits, some more drafts, going through the text finally to make sure every word, every single word is exactly how you want it. Um, saying that it's perfect, and then a week later saying, no, no, I need to change this one word to this.
Yeah.
My writing career will be
Imposter
ruined
syndrome. Oh
if I
no.
don't change this one word.
Yeah.
And then the illustrations, and the publisher typically, finds the artist. They often have an idea. They might want to pair a new picture book author like myself with a more experienced illustrator, or they might just have a style in mind that they want to use. And then, there's more time after they find the illustrator, because the illustrator has to get to work, and
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
a really long process.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's so exciting when you get to see the sketches. And at that point, I've been asked for feedback, and I've been lucky. I absolutely adore the
They are
illustrations.
so good.
Susanna Covelli, I have to give her credit. She did such amazing work. She
There's a cutout in the cover.
isn't it so cool? Yeah,
I did
there's a
not
cutout. I
know
can
that.
send.
That's so cool. Sorry, briefly geeking out moment.
Yeah,
That's
I
awesome.
absolutely love this. Familius did a great job. Susanna Covelli did a great
Yeah.
job. And that is another difference with middle grade novels. I've had some, of course, I've had the cover art for my middle grade novels. And I've been lucky to have really beautiful illustrations for the covers. Dead Boy also had some spot illustrations, and that was a lot of fun. But having a fully illustrated book is just a whole other level. And I think as a picture book author, you kind of have to accept that it's not just your book. This is as
Yeah.
much Susanna Covelli's book as it is mine.
Yeah.
So I have to share that, and I'm happy to, because it makes it.
It's really lovely. Can you hold it up just a little bit higher? Yeah. She did such a good job. The vibe of the illustrations and the vibe of the text go so well together. I really love it. I'm so excited to have it in the store. Like all we've seen so far is the images that they put up on our catalog, the Edelweiss.
Mhm.
So Edelweiss for any, for everybody watching is a platform that publishers upload their catalogs to, and that's what we use to choose what we're going to bring into the store. And so often with picture books, they will have sample spreads so you can kind of get an idea of what the story is about and what the illustrations are like. And so we've seen those and they're amazing, but I didn't know there was a cutout in the cover, so now I'm excited. But yeah, she did a fantastic job. So, can you tell us a little bit about the story itself? Like kind of like the flap copy without giving away the good bit at the end, so that people can maybe the elevator pitch so people can get excited about it.
Okay, so Owen is the main character, and he is frustrated with his mother's rules. He thinks he should be able to have ice cream for breakfast. He doesn't want to have to go to bed when she says it's bedtime. He just doesn't understand her rules. And he wants a robot because he thinks a robot would be better. A robot wouldn't tell him what to do. A robot would do whatever he told it to do. And so he enters a contest for a robot kit. He enters it quite a bit. The beginning shows him filling
There
out
was that spread.
lots of
Yeah.
entries.
I
And
know the big stacks is great.
he wins he wins the robot. And he thinks it's going to be wonderful, but it doesn't go exactly as he had hoped.
That's perfect. Yeah, no, it's fun. Um, I thought I was like, what can I ask her that has to do with the story that's just completely silly? So this is completely unrelated to the book, except for it's related to Owen's problem of needing the robot to do things for him the way he wants them to be done. if you could have a list for your own personal robot, what are things that your robot would do for you?
Oh, well, cleaning, obviously. I think
Of
cleaning
course. Yes.
is what everyone would want it to do. If it
I
could
sure would.
clean the bathrooms for me, do the
Yes.
dishes, dust, vacuum. Oh, yard work. If it could take care of the yard, not the gardening because I like that, but pulling weeds. I'll water
Yes.
the garden, but it can pull
Yeah,
the
it
weeds
would.
and do the hard work. And my taxes, if it could do my
Okay. That
taxes.
seems like a reasonable list.
In fact, I'll do the cleaning if it can just do my taxes.
Yeah. I don't know though. I think the cleaning would be better. That's repeatable more times than the taxes only come once a year. So,
uh, no, as an independent
well,
contractor,
that's true.
yeah.
That's true. Um, do you have more in the pipeline that you can talk about? Because we recognize that sometimes there are stages in the process that you can't talk about it yet, but you have at least one other one, I think, that's coming out relatively soon.
Right. I have another picture book from a different publisher that is scheduled to come out next year. So there's not a
Whoa.
lot out about that one yet, but it should be very soon. And I'm very excited about that as
Good.
well. Um,
That's
and then,
awesome.
of course, a lot of other things in the works with my
Good.
agent
Good.
on sub, but just have to
Yeah.
keep my fingers
Yeah.
crossed about those.
Exactly. Tell us a little bit again, this is like something that I'm aware of, but I think it's fun for people to know, like what does that look like when you're working with an agent? Like what is that, how does that process work?
Well, let's see. There's a lot of waiting again.
Yeah, yeah,
So when I have a manuscript, I'll send it to my agent and see what she thinks. Sometimes I'll tell her about an idea, if I want to get her feedback, or I want to see like if she thinks there's a market for it. But often I wait until I actually have a manuscript, especially for shorter manuscripts.
yeah,
For longer ones, I might tell her when I'm working on it, since that's more of an investment in time.
yeah, yeah,
And then getting her feedback. I tend to have a lot of projects, so sometimes it's a matter of deciding which ones should be the priority.
yeah.
And she'll usually have at least some edits for me. So I'll work on some revisions. She'll often want me to come up with a better title because
Titles are hard.
titles are not my strengths. um, and then we'll talk about when she's going to send things out, and she'll give me a list of editors that she's planning on sending it to. And then we'll just talk maybe once a month and hear what people have to say or what they don't say, since
Yeah,
responses have been a bit slower since 2020,
yeah,
quite a bit slower. And I've heard that's
yeah,
across the board,
yeah.
which makes me feel a little better.
Yeah, I don't think that's just you. I think,
No.
but it seems like the whole industry in some ways has kind of slowed down a little bit.
Mhm.
Supply lines are still have been affected, even though it's better than it was. And yeah,
Yeah. Things are still moving along, things are still getting published,
but,
but it can
but
take longer.
yeah, yeah,
Patience is important.
yes. So do you think you will work in middle grade again too, or are you mostly just focused on picture books right now?
um, no, I want to keep writing middle grade. I also have been trying my hand at some chapter book series.
Nice.
So no news
Yeah.
there, but I
Yeah.
have
Can
been
you
working on that.
share a little for the anybody in the audience that isn't aware? I know middle grade is actually tricky to explain to people sometimes in the store
Mhm,
because of the name, because we
mhm,
think middle school equates with middle grade, and actually middle grade starts younger than middle school and then goes up.
mhm.
Can you talk a little bit about the difference between chapter books in middle grade and where those two kind of overlap a little and where they're separate?
Yeah, so chapter books are for a slightly younger audience than middle grade. Middle grade is normally defined as for readers between the ages of 8 and 12. There can be some variations in that, in
Yeah,
upper middle
yeah,
grade and lower middle grade, but usually 8 to 12 is the main audience. And the books are pretty good length, usually at least 30,000, but often much longer than that. If 50,000 is common, some go up to 60,000, 70,000. They can get pretty
yeah,
hefty.
yeah,
And they have, chapters, plots, subplots. So basically, a lot of them are, in terms of the format, just like novels for adults, maybe a little bit shorter, but not always shorter.
yeah,
A
yeah.
middle grade novel could be longer than a cozy mystery.
Yes, yeah,
Chapter books are for a slightly younger audience. And they are shorter, usually around 6,000 to 10,000 words, I want to say. I should have checked the stats.
that's okay. I mean, it's general. It's
Yeah.
generally, I think,
Yeah,
as
so
long as
they're a
you're
lot
in the ballpark.
shorter.
Yeah,
They're a
yeah,
lot shorter. They're kind of for readers who are just becoming independent and they're able to read books with chapters and with longer storylines, more complex storylines. But they're still pretty short and they typically have spot illustrations throughout, not as heavily illustrated as a picture book, but more illustrations than you would expect
right.
in a novel, which might not have any at all.
Yeah, yeah. That would be really fun to get into that, I think.
I think
It's
so
a,
too.
it's a, yeah, that's very neat. So, do you find that there is anything, even though you've written middle grade, you've written picture books, you're working on some chapter books, do you find there's anything that ties your writing together in any way, like themes that continue to come out for you, or areas that are topics that you find really fun that you keep coming back to?
Let's see. That's kind of hard because I do tend to write about a lot of different things, but I think that kind of my voice and my sense of humor ties a lot of it together. I also really like speculative elements, whether it's a kind of sci-fi robot,
Yeah,
not
yeah.
exactly a robot that you would get in a robot kit off the shelves today, or more like fantasy monsters.
Yeah, yeah,
I often incorporate that, and animals come up a lot because I love animals.
yeah,
That's not in this book, but animals do play a role in a lot of my writing, I would say.
yeah, yeah. Another thing I think I see in all your writing is, and I think this is true in like middle grade and picture books in general anyway, but the kids just having um agency, I
Mhm,
think, um wanting to do things themselves. And I was just
mhm.
trying to think about the other stories that you've written because it has been a little while since I read them, but I think there's definitely that sense of uh not just that the kid is the main character and that they're the driving force of the novel, because that's, or picture book, because that's true of most middle grade and picture books, but just there's a little bit of a The only word I can think of on is ornery, but it's more determination, I guess, is a better word because it's not
Mm.
like I'm going out to just be doing things that I shouldn't be doing on purpose, but it's more just like a knowing who you are, wanting things to be a certain way that pops up in all of your characters too, which I think is fun. I think a lot of
Yeah.
kids can probably relate to that.
Yeah, and a lot of that might come from the fact that I really got my start in writing middle grade. So that deals with a lot of characters who are really just trying to discover who they are,
Yeah,
and become their own person. Um, and that probably does carry over into my writing when I write for other ages too. That it's that idea of wanting some degree of independence. Owen certainly wants that. He wants to
yeah,
be able to
yeah,
do what he wants to do, not what his mother tells him to
yeah.
do.
Do you have do you picture a certain kind of reader? Even though you know that there's going to be a lot of different kids reading your books, when you are writing, do you ever think about a specific kind of reader reading the books?
I try to think about what kids are going to enjoy, not just the editors, and other
Yeah.
adults involved
Yeah,
in the gatekeeping, but what is really going to appeal to children and what they'll find funny or what might be meaningful to them because they would be able to relate to the concerns, or the frustrations, the worries. But more than that, I don't have a specific type of reader in mind. It's more maybe, I mean, I guess with some books, depending on what the topic is, it might be readers with similar frustrations. Like if it's a book about a character who is very worried about everything, to be my next picture book, then I would say I am thinking about children who are worried,
yeah, yeah,
or the adults who are worried and who have those concerns. Here, of course, it's more about a child who's frustrated with rules. But I also think maybe that's kind of a universal experience for
yeah,
children.
yeah, yeah. And adults.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I think that for me personally, that's why I still enjoy reading pretty much across the age spectrum. I love picture books. I read some middle grade. I read YA. I read adult. And I think it's just because at the end of the day, a lot of the themes that you find in any of the books, no matter what the age are universal. And you can relate. I mean, I can relate to Owen. I don't want anybody telling me what to do. Now, obviously, I'm adult. I could eat ice cream for breakfast if I wanted to. But yeah, I do think a lot of the themes are universal.
Mhm.
Um, oh shoot, I was gonna ask you something and now it's out of my head. Have you had any feedback? Have you gotten to have feedback from kids for not yet for this one, obviously, because it's not out yet, but for your middle grade novels that you've found particularly sort of, made you just feel really good or was particularly funny or just was great feedback?
Yeah, I mean, it's always wonderful to hear from, the target audience, the children that the book
Yeah.
is actually for. And I really like it when I hear about their favorite characters, or the
Yeah.
characters that they relate to the most. Or what's really amazing that happened at least a couple of times when kids tell me that they've done like an art project based on something from the book. And it's just so neat, um, to see that the book kind of sparked that creativity and that
Yeah.
they've approached it in that way. That's always really fun.
How do you keep the only way I can think to phrase this is finger on the pulse, and which is a terrible phrase, um but how do you kind of keep what are the touch points for you to keep kind of with it, kind of keep in connection with kids, so that you can kind of, when you're writing for kids, you kind of have some familiarity of what they are? Do you have those kind of touch points, or do you just rely on like interactions that you've had over time or in the past to kind of, because some of these things are universal regardless of, how old we are or when we were kids. So I was just curious if you have a way to connect that helps you keep fresh.
Well, it's it's always important to keep reading. Um, yeah, when I want to write picture books, when I started writing picture books, I needed to read picture books, and I still read picture books, and I enjoy reading picture books, so it's not like that's really a burden. But I'd say that it's very important, and that helps me remember and kind of keep up with um, the issues that might matter. And a lot of it is, yeah, just using my own experience, thinking back to what things were like for me when I was a
Yeah,
kid, and maybe what types of books I might have liked to read. Uh,
yeah, yeah. I don't think so. It's so interesting because the world is so different now than for sure when I was a kid, but for, when you were a kid too. But I think a lot of the fundamental feelings and whatnot haven't, those don't really change. And so as
mhm.
long as you can tap into that, you can remember how it felt when your mom told you couldn't have ice cream for breakfast and told you to go to bed, dang it, when you didn't want to. So I am going to jump over before we close up. I am going to like take a hard left turn really quick here because I want you to be able to share a little bit about where people can find you online.
Mhm.
And also, you have another hobby that I absolutely love and that people can also enjoy,
Mhm.
and find on your website. So can you talk a little bit about where people can find you and the other passion of yours that they'll find on your website as well?
Okay. So I assume you're talking about wildlife photography.
I am.
Okay. Yes, I love wildlife photography. I I find it's it's just a great way. Sometimes it sparks creativity for my writing, so there's some overlap with that. And I post a lot of my photographs online. The easiest way to find me would be to go to my website, www.laurelgale.com. Um, just laurelgale.com. And I have links to everything else on my website. So that would be the central hub. I'm on a lot of social media platforms, but I'm not active on all of them because social media takes a lot of time.
Yes, it does.
So I don't post on Facebook or Instagram that regularly. I try to check it fairly often, but I'm not as active there. I'm mostly on Twitter and Blue Sky. And
Okay.
yeah, and
Okay.
Blue Sky, Laurel Gale, at Laurel Gale, and then the Blue Sky address that everyone has. And Twitter is at Laurel_Gale. But
Okay.
again, my website
Yeah, I'll put
links
the
to
I'll put
everything.
the website in the video description so people can find you. The reason I will say to the audience, the reason I brought that up is because Laurel's for wildlife photography is amazing. And she has like calendars and mugs and all kinds of fun stuff that you can find. So if that is your jam, definitely look for that because it's lovely and she has all kinds of cool animals. And she's in a part of the world where she gets to see all kinds of cool animals. So it's very fun. So look for the wildlife photography. Look for the book on the 15th. Robots Don't Make You Go to Bed. We will have it in the store. And I am pretty sure that we have some of her middle grade novels in the middle grade section, but we don't put everything in the computer. A lot of times, if they're a paperback that we think is going to move very quickly, we don't put it in the computer. So I can't swear because when I when I went to check tonight, it wasn't there, but I think it is there. But we can always order stuff too. So definitely look for those books at the store. And thank you so much for being with us tonight. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
You too. Have a good night.